Hello, I'm here with Charlie Wilson. And Charlie is a leadership consultant of over 11 years who actually started out in the Navy. There seems to be a bit of a theme with good leadership consultants. Charlie, you've got a really impressive background since you started Bosideon, working with really great clients such as the Royal Society of Biology and Thames Water. Welcome, and first of all, how are you doing?
Well, thanks for having me on. Well, the most important thing is my family and I are all well, symptom-free, and all of us coping with the lockdown in our own various ways.
Fantastic. And how are you actually finding that you're adapting your work in this climate?
Well, I think like many people, I've had to radically change how I do my work. I've always relied very heavily on face-to-face communication with people, either in training or in coaching. Of course, that's had to stop. Like everyone else, I'm starting to use Zoom an awful lot. I've learned that there is such a thing as Zoom fatigue, which is people getting tired of using video communication. And it's not quite as bad when it's one-to-one. But when you have a gallery with a large number of faces in front of you, then some people certainly can find that very tiring indeed.
Yeah, I'm certainly finding that. As you know, we are both members of the STEM Advisors Hub, and we're a group of specialists who work in the science and technology sectors, and we get together on a regular basis, and it is quite tiring having all of us there. And you're right. It's easier when it's on a one-to-one. How are your clients adapting in the current situation?
Well, again, most of my clients, because they've had to move where they can to online work, they are struggling like everyone else is, I think, with how do you manage teams and people when you can't actually meet face to face. The other thing I've noticed is that I think we're all used to having busy lives anyway. We're all used to having demands on us from home life, from work life, from hobbies and outside activities. But the nature of those demands being put on us have changed as a result of the current crisis. And therefore, for people to be able to cope, to be able to be resilient, then people are having to learn to cope differently because the demands come in a different way.
And how are you helping people with that? What thoughts have you got on how we can be helping ourselves a bit more with those different demands?
Well, I sat down and had to think about it. I thought about my own situation and came up with a fairly simple model to explain resilience to myself, and I developed it into a webinar, which I'm running some pro bono, online just webinars, giving people a model and a way to think about their own personal resilience, because their company may have organised the IT and everything so that an organisation is really resilient. But if the people themselves are not coping with the pressure, then the organisation is not going to be resilient.
So that's around their own personal mindsets. And because I don't know about you, Charlie, I actually feel busier at the moment. The boundaries around the work and life have blurred somewhat, and sometimes I don't know where the day has gone. Are you finding the same?
I am finding the same, and it's one of the aspects when I talk about resilience. I invite people to think about. To start off, think of a spring. If you think of a spring and you put a weight on a spring, it gets longer. And assuming all goes well, you take the weight off and the spring goes sprawling back to where it started. And if the weight isn't too much and it isn't on all the time, then you can go on putting the weight on, taking it off, forever and without any problems. Problems start to come when the weight is left on the spring. Because as we all know, if you leave a weight on a spring for a long time, you take the weight off and the spring doesn't quite go back to where it started. It's been stretched a bit. And the other thing is if you put too much weight on a spring, it overstretches. It straightens out. It's no longer a spring. You take the weight off, and nothing happens because it's not
like, yeah, it's a really good analogy. It's a bit like a deformed slinky.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I do refer sometimes. If people are coping, then it's like being a slinky on an escalator.
That's a good way of thinking about it.
But if you think about the nature, so if you think therefore of your resilience as the weight being put on a spring, there are a couple of things about that. The first, if you where the weights come from, and I invite people to think about the weights that are being put on the spring under 4 headings. There's the physical. Now, my job is not physically demanding, but some people who have caring responsibilities, for example, do have a physical aspect of what they're doing. There's a mental challenge. Certainly, most of the challenges in my work are cognitive. They're to do with thinking. There are emotional demands being put on people, your own coping with your own emotions and dealing with other people's, which leads into the 4th source of demands, which is social. So the demands of your social group. But the thing is that we only have one spring. So all these demands are being put on the same spring. And the fact that you've managed to take 2 weights off, but have forgotten the other 2, means that your spring is not going to recover.
Okay, so that's really thoughtful. And how can I and other people sign up to these webinars that you mentioned?
Well, I'm going to start running them weekly. And if people email me, then I'll add them on to the invitation for the Zoom call. And yeah, very, very happy to do that. And there's an opportunity during these calls for people to chat about their own personal experience. I give some practical tips as well about how to strengthen your spring and how to take the weights off. And sometimes some of the subjects that come up aren't suitable for an open Zoom call. So again, I'm very happy to do some free coaching afterwards as well for people to help them cope with their situation.
That's great. So it's C. Wilson at Bosideon.co.uk, isn't it?
Yes, that's me. Yeah.
And I'll make sure people have got that information as well. That's very generous offer, and I'm assuming people can dip in and out of the calls as they need.
Yes, they can, and I can. I haven't yet written stuff into. I'm probably going to do a LinkedIn blog or posting or something, but I'll write it up so that people can actually look at it in their own time as well.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you for sharing that. I certainly will look out for the Zoom fatigue and sign up for your webinars, Charlie. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.